This is USVI News, your Virgin Islands connection.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us for USVI News. I'm Emily Matson. A St. Croix man's facing attempted murder and arson charges after police say he set several fires at a St. Croix gym. He's identified as 26-year-old Luis Felix Santos. He also goes by Bebo. On Wednesday, around 10 p.m., the victims called 911 to say Santos came shouting and banging at their room doors at their living quarters inside the Old Paradise gym. While inside, police say Santos lit 2 large fires and threatened to kill the victims. Fortunately, they were able to escape and firefighters arrived and put the fires out. Police say Santos was standing in front of the building when they arrived and he was arrested and is in jail under a $100,000 bond. As an Anna St. Thomas contractor is arrested again after police say he bilked more people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. 45-year-old Anson Galloway turned himself into police this week. Detectives from the Economic Crimes Unit started an investigation into Galloway back in June after they received complaints from 5 people. Investigators say he used 3 different business names to sell prefabricated homes and never provided the services he promised, causing a loss of more than $238,000 to the victims. He is in jail now and facing charges of grand larceny and theft of services. When the new Congress is in place next year, the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis will no longer be around. But before the committee wraps up, they released a final report on what Congress can work on in order to fight our climate crisis. USVI News Washington, D.C. correspondent Rachel Knapp reports.
The House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis says the climate crisis is unmistakably here.
We've already experienced raging wildfires, hazardous air quality, ocean acidification that's harming fisheries.
They say climate disasters are putting America's security and stability at risk and threatening our economy, our way of life, and our communities.
Climate disasters are inflicting billions in damages across the country.
In a final report from the committee, they list their accomplishments which address climate change.
We passed the bipartisan infrastructure law to make communities more resilient and electrify transportation. We passed the CHIPS Act to empower our industries to lead the clean energy transition. And we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest clean energy and climate investment in U.S. history.
Although the committee says when Republicans take control of the House in January, this committee will dissolve. They say there's room for bipartisan work on combating climate change. They see an opportunity for bipartisan climate change work in the upcoming Farm Bill.
Farmers are leading the charge now. They are awake to the harsh impacts of water shortages, extreme heat on their crops and products.
The group lays out a huge list of recommendations for the next Congress, like moving more towards electrification of cars and buildings, more pollution-reducing policies, and more.
We must continue to fight for climate action that is bold, that is science-based, that is rooted in justice, and that it's beneficial to workers and families.
At the Capitol, Rachel Knapp reporting.
Active COVID-19 cases remain a bit high in the territory, although they are declining. According to the latest numbers from the VI Department of Health, there are currently 67 active COVID cases territory-wide, with 46 on St. Croix, 21 active cases on St. Thomas, and still no active cases reported on St. John. Flu season has hit hard and early in the U.S. this season. Public health leaders say people are tired of being reminded to get their shots. So here's more on why this vaccine fatigue is leaving the nation especially vulnerable to respiratory viruses.
In the U.S., it's never an easy sell. Less than half of the population has gotten an annual flu shot for at least the past decade. And that's not the only respiratory virus wreaking havoc right now, leaving some hospitals struggling to keep up with the influx of patients.
We've got beds and hallways in the emergency department for patients who've been admitted and are waiting for hospital beds.
At UC San Diego Health, tents are also set up in the parking lot, extra beds for those needing triage. In the past couple of weeks, there's been a surge in cases of the flu and other respiratory viruses.
So these tents are up as a contingency. We hope we won't need them, but we anticipate we will as we face this coming surge.
CDC data shows millions fewer doses of the flu vaccine have been distributed this season compared to this point in previous years. Only 26% of adults had gotten their flu shot by the end of October, a deadline health experts say provides the best protection throughout the season. As for the updated COVID-19 booster, fewer than 1 in 7 eligible people have rolled up their sleeves since it was authorized in the fall. But it is not too late to get vaccinated.
The influenza vaccine that we have this year really matches the strains of the flu that are causing illness. So I would encourage people to receive your flu vaccine right away if you haven't.
And a new government report estimates how many Americans have died from long COVID since the pandemic began. Naomi Ruckham has more on the findings and one person's struggle with the long-term effects.
Nurse Patrice Peretti got very sick with COVID-19 in March 2020. Today, the 62-year-old battles long COVID, extreme fatigue, pain, neurological and memory issues. Eventually, she had to stop working.
I'm going to try not to cry because I was hanging in there. The wave came and the increase in hours, and we were at war, really, and I was injured.
It's estimated as many as 23 million Americans have long COVID symptoms. Now a new report shows more than 3,500 people have died from long COVID-related illnesses in the first 2.5 years of the pandemic.
Perhaps they have a complication, like let's say they have underlying congestive heart failure, and that condition is exacerbated by having long COVID. Or perhaps you have diabetes and your diabetes becomes harder to control.
People 75 and older accounted for more than half the deaths. Dr. Sritha Rajupate directs the post-COVID clinic at Stony Brook Medicine. She says one study limitation is that researchers looked at death certificates and the numbers are likely higher.
I think this is where we have an opportunity to study long COVID further. And so we want to look back and ask, were they vaccinated for COVID? Did they receive oral antiviral treatments? All of those could play an impact.
I go to physical therapy. I do hydrotherapy.
Patrice says she has hope.
I want to say I'm getting better, so therefore I will become better. But today I'm not feeling well. See, so you could have something, a diagnosis that's really, really horrific, but be in a good state of mind.
She wants others with long COVID to know they're not alone.
We have some sad news from the entertainment world to report. Stephen Twitch Boss, a dancer and longtime DJ for the Ellen DeGeneres Show, has died. Boss rose to fame after appearing on So You Think You Can Dance, but really made a name for himself on the Ellen Show, where he eventually became an executive producer in 2020. Early reports are that Boss took his own life on Tuesday. He leaves behind a wife and 3 children. He was just 40 years old.